Hello, biology students. Mrs. Smith here. We're going to be working on writing up your first lab report of the year for the fish respiration lab. Just want to give you a couple of quick tips on how to get started and also show you how to make data tables and graphs using Microsoft Word if you are unfamiliar with those programs. Now, what you need in front of you is your fish respiration lab template, which you can see right here. You should have this completely filled out by now. And you also need an open Word document. So first thing you want to do is put your name up in the corner. If you're not sure how to change the alignment, the tabs are up here. You can see me pointing at them. And I am Mrs. Smith. I am in biology class. Let's pretend I'm in period 6. And then you're going to want to write the due date on there. Next part on your lab report was your title. So put your title here. And we want that in the middle. Not required, but it's always a good idea to bold print it and underline it just to make it stand out. You can also make it a little bit larger if you'd like. You can go up here, click that bigger A, that makes it bigger. If you're like, no, that's too big, you can click on the little arrow and that's going to make it smaller. If you want to go back to left alignment, you don't really want to center all of your text. And I don't want it underlined, I don't want it bold, and I want it back to a normal font size. Normal font size would be 11 or 12. If you go back and refer to your lab template, the next thing is the problem. You want to organize your lab report so the reader knows what's going on. If you hit Control B is a shortcut to bold printing. So I'm going to bold print and I'm going to write problem. I'm going to unbold it. I hit Control B again. Another option would just be to hit the B button up here. And then you're going to write your problem, whatever it is you wrote on your lab sheet. Remember, it is a question, so make sure you end in a question mark. Skip a line. Let's go back and reference. It says concepts. You're going to have 2 separate paragraphs on concepts. Whatever you write here, that is what you want to write in your lab report. What I wrote here in italics, that is not what you write in your lab report. That was reference material for you. So if we go back to our Word document, I'm going to Control B. So it is bold printed. There's my concepts. I'm going to write my first paragraph, then I'm going to write my second paragraph. Make sure you're not abbreviating words. Make sure you're spelling things appropriately. And if you have questions, make sure you come and see me. If we look, next section, we can scroll down a little bit, is your hypothesis template. So again, you're going to fill in the appropriate information. Do not write out whatever is in italics. That was for your reference. If we keep moving on, we have materials and equipment. Materials and equipment is one of the sections where you do not need to write in complete sentences. It would be a good idea to make a list. If you're not sure how to make a list, I'll show you real quick. There is a button up here. This is the bullet button. If you press it, it automatically starts making bullets. So you type what you want, hit enter, and it just keeps making bullet points. What if you're like, oh, those circles are horrible, I want a different bullet point? Well, you go up and click on the little arrow right here, and there are other options you can choose. Moving on. Safety, same thing as with the other sections. Create a heading and then put in the necessary information. Data, you're going to want to create a data table. You should not be making a data table by hand. You should be making it using the computer. So we've got our data section. If you've never made a data table on Word before, it is not very difficult. We're going to go up to the top, find the Insert tab, and we're going to insert a table. And you can make it as many columns and rows as you need. So I'm just going to start here and show you a couple things that you can do to make your data table look really nice. First of all, let's say you make this and you think to yourself, shoot, I need another row on there. Go to the bottom, right-click, and they're going to give you some options. You can go up to Insert, and we're going to say we want another row below. And what if you think, wait a second, I need another column too? You can right-click, go up to Insert, and insert another column. Now, what if you want this whole section to have a certain heading? You can highlight those two, right-click, and we can merge those two. Maybe we wanted to merge those and merge these. This would allow you to have 3 different headings on top. I'm not saying you need to do that, I'm just showing you some options depending on how you made your data table. Now let's say you had some kind of a heading here and you wanted that highlighted. You could center it, you could bold it, you could increase the font size if you wanted to. And if you look at this little paint button right here, you can pick any color and that makes it look really nice. Now, let's say you needed to split this into two different cells. You could right click on it and there is an option for split cells. And let's say I want it to be 2 columns and 2 rows. You can see it will split it into exactly what I want. What if you're like, oops, that is not what I wanted? There's this little blue arrow up here that means take back whatever I just did. Using that information, you should be able to get a nice data table. Moving on. Don't forget to add your qualitative observations. Remember, qualitative means observations you made using your senses, so things that you could observe with your eyes or smell, such as what the fish looked like, its behavior, things like that. All right, graph is the next section. You should be able to make your graph on the computer as well. If you've never done that before, I'm going to help you out. What you want to do is you want to go to Insert, and we're going to pick Chart. Got some nice line graphs here. When you open up a line graph, it's going to open up an Excel document, and this is where you're going to put your information. Now, I'm not going to make your graph for you. I'm going to show you how to make one of the graphs we did previously as an example. So if you remember, previously in class, we were looking at this practice problem number 1, where we were graphing the average thickness of annual rings in 2 different forests compared to the age of the trees. This is the information that I'm going to be graphing. So if you look categories 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can see them all along here. So that is where we put the age of trees. So that's where I'm going to put my data. 10, 20, 30, we had 35, 50, and 60. And if you look at these numbers, those are your dependent axis. So that's where you're going to put your dependent variable. I'm going to pause the video real quick just so I can add in the data. All right, I added in all my data, as you can see right here, but for this particular graph, there's not a third set of data, so I'm going to move that over, and you can see that green line disappeared because that data is not part of my data set. You should have 3 lines for yours, one for trial 1, one for trial 2, and one for class averages, so you'll use all 3 of those series. Now that we have our lines drawn, I can go back and I need to add some stuff. This does not look like a good scientific graph yet. If you click the layout button, this is going to let us add a title. So average thickness of annual rings versus age of trees. We can add our axes. So our horizontal is the age of trees in years. We also want to do our vertical. Other things you can change the legend, so you can show where it is going to end up, which I'm going to keep it as is. Data labels you can turn on or off. I have them turned off right now. Data table, we don't want to show that there, we already made that. Axes we already did. If you want to show grid lines, you can. So it looks like an actual graph, which you can see right there. Trend lines, we can show linear trend lines for both the series. That's going to show your line of best fit, so that would be a good idea to show. And now you can see we have a title, we have our dependent and independent variables on the correct axes, we have units for each of them, we have our points plotted, we have lines of best fit, and we have a key showing what each stands for. That would be the most basic parts of the graph. If you want to play around with some of these other parts, you can as well. Moving on. Everything else is just filling in the information that you have on your rough draft handout, making sure that you include headings or titles for each part and that you do not write this italicized portion right here. What you're typing up is the information that you wrote here. Make sure you go all the way to the very end. So the last part of your lab report should be the experimental design that you chose that will continue to study this scientific concept. That's all your introduction information for now. Please see me if you have any questions.